In the wake of Fyre Festival, what is your own terribly planned event horror story? In St. Augustine, Florida 2 years ago, there was a bacon festival where you could pay something like $12 or $15 at the gate to get in and eat all things bacon. Every vendor there was supposed to be feeding you something with bacon in it. Most things were supposed to be free after you paid your entry fee. It was supposed to be an all-day event. After 2 hours they ran out of bacon. They kept charging the entry fee and letting people in, though. I bought a same-day ski lift ticket online once, only to arrive at the mountain to find they had closed for the goddamn season. The lady wouldn't give me a refund. Small New Year's get-together. People wanted me to buy beer for the party. Of the 15 people who wanted to drink, 2 actually pitched on what should have been a keg. No one else would respond to my asking for cash but would constantly ask if I bought a keg already. I didn't, but had the brewery reserve one. Night beforehand I decided frick these guys and went and bought as much beer as had money for. On New Year's Day everyone who didn't pitch started blowing up my phone asking where the beer was and how they didn't have money to pitch. Decided to stay at one of the guys' house with the beer, invite the only other guy who pitched, and we drank ourselves silly as people would call to complain we didn't deliver the beer they didn't pay for. Frick them and frick their race. Though, that really makes me appreciate my friends. Every party people would BYO but they would chip in communal drinks and snacks. It was just an unspoken thing that if you were short on cash, you'd still be looked after by the communal pool, and no one ever seemed to take advantage of that. Everyone had turns being on both sides. I used to work in mall management as an intern in a 4-person marketing department. Holiday season came around and my boss quit and his boss got in a bad car accident, leaving just me and one other person. This resulted in me taking on more responsibility, including planning events for the mall. My first event was a disaster. It was a children's event where a children's character was coming to read chapters from a new book. Can't recall which character. I had to make sure I had activities planned in between the readings to keep the kids entertained. There's a clown that is usually hired for these events but he was unavailable that day. The day I found out he couldn't participate, a lady showed up soliciting her services as a master balloon artist. I was desperate to get someone so I agreed to hire her. Outside of her, I set up a coloring station where kids could color the character from the book. She was told to there at least 15 minutes before the start of the event. 5 minutes before she still wasn't there and I called her. No response. Kept calling her every 5 minutes until 30 minutes after the event started she picked up and said she's sorry and is on her way. She shows up. I tell her to get to work right away since it's now an hour into a 2-hour event. Prior to her showing up, people stole the coloring supplies about 20 minutes into the event, so there was an awkward 40 minutes with nothing going on outside of brief readings by the character. Anyway, 5 minutes into the act I have a parent come up to me saying something's off about her. Another parent comes up to me and says she reeks of booze. I immediately go over and see her struggling with every balloon animal. I decided to wait until she finishes with the last 3 kids to not cause a scene. I also smelt the booze on her. The last kid, she goes, "What the frick do you want at him?" I immediately got security to escort her out the building. She made an excuse of losing a friend the night before and didn't know how to cope with it. If that was true, I wish she would have called out instead of showing up drunk and berating kids. That is both sad and hilarious. Won a contest with Warped Tour where I, along with maybe 9 others, got to go on stage with a main stage band of our choice and watch from side stage. It was a legitimate contest with winners for each date. I saw photos and heard stories from other winners, so I was ecstatic when I found out I won. The person who was in charge of us winners had their van break down on the way that morning. We were told to meet up with another woman until they got it fixed. Ended up having to volunteer packing promotional products in plastic bags and handing them out. After about 4 hours apart from my friends, doing work, and missing half of my favorite bands, me and another girl said frick it, dropped the box of bags in a crowd and took off. Still not sure if the lady ever showed up. Just crappy to expect to go on stage with one of your favorite bands only for that to happen. They didn't seem to care. I also won a contest with Warped Tour. There were 4 of us. I was so excited, but we ended up behind the band on the stairs of the stage. We couldn't really see anything. Silverstein wouldn't acknowledge us and pretended we didn't exist. I don't know what I was expecting. After the show, a few of the members shoved past us and one of them ended up elbowing one of the other winners pretty hard. 2016 Manitoba Air Show. The organizers planned for 6,000 people to show up, but they sold unlimited tickets. 18,000 people bought advance tickets, selling another 4K at the gate. It was in a small airfield just outside the city. We left especially early at around 9 AM, which was good, because while we were still in a massive traffic jam, we arrived by 11 AM. People who left an hour after us were stuck until the early afternoon. Some people never made it all, giving up after spending 6 hours trying to get to the event. There was only one functional entrance to the parking lot for the event. Parking was terrible, but my GF is disabled and they at least had handicap parking. They did not, however, have a handicap entrance. The end of the line to get into the event was a good 5-minute walk from handicap parking. My girlfriend can stand and walk for short periods of time, which is why we brought a wheelchair, but her wheelchair was unusable in the mud. We managed to get in without standing in line when one of the organizers realized how stupid this situation was. The event itself was fun. The aerial displays were fantastic, and seeing some historical planes up close was fun. This is pretty much the only nice thing to say about this event. On a day that was quite hot, there were no easy places to get water if you weren't staff. You were limited to the food trucks. There was a place that sold lemonade, but they sold out before noon. As for the food trucks, there were about a quarter as many as were needed for the amount of people who showed up. I waited in line for over 2 hours to get a couple of hot dogs and drinks. When I got in that line I could barely make out the truck in the distance. Don't even get me started on the bathroom issue. When the event ended, there was no organization to get out of the parking lot. It was every man for himself. The parking lot was basically a wet field of grass, and by this point in time had been turned into pure mud. I was driving a Jeep, so I was okay, but I heard stories of people waiting hours for help to get their car unstuck due there being one tractor assigned the duty. The event was such a shitshow. They talked about it in the newspapers the next day. The organizers were adamant they would not be giving out any refunds. And then it was revealed that the entire event was organized by a college class as an assignment, which pissed off people even more. College class as an assignment. That's a bunch of bulls. I hope those suckers failed that assignment. My wife and I threw a combined bachelorette party. Not one person showed up. Maybe not a horror story, but still horribly depressing. It was Queen's Day in the Netherlands and a local venue decided to host a little festival on a square somewhere. It wasn't a big festival, only one stage and like 3 stands, but it was kinda nice. Except it was rained the entire day. Turnout was low, so the main act was some sort of ska band, which I loved and took every opportunity to be there, so I went. The turnout was around 50 people, but as the day progressed, people started leaving and when the main act started, I was the only one in front of the stage, with the occasional braveheart who took shelter in one of the stands. The guys in the band were really cool and played the set nicely, even let me take a pee break. It was surreal to leave and notice that only the organization was left. TLDR, I was the lone audience member for the main act of a small town festival. TLDR, I was the lone audience member for the main act of a small town festival. No. That ska band came to your town to play for you. The others weren't leaving. They were ushered out by security to give you space. I ran the Vancouver half marathon back in the 90s. I started checking for a porta potty around mile 4. I started asking volunteers around mile 5. There wasn't one. Not one. A half marathon is just over 13 miles long. Have you ever had to crap for 9 miles? Frick them. Frick their race. Another race. This was the Beat the Bridge run in Seattle. The idea is that you run fast enough so that you cross a bridge before it goes up. At the time, I wasn't in that great of shape, so it was a difficult run. I poured my heart and soul into it. I was so happy to come around that corner and see the goddamn bridge going up a few minutes early. You had one job, which was not to raise the bridge early. Butt munches. Frick them. Frick their race. The Komen Race for the Cure, a timed event for which I trained for months. I'm a cancer survivor and I was pretty sure I could do well in my little survivor group, so I trained hard. Race day comes, we are issued race numbers, and off we go. I work it hard. I'm chugging and puffing and running my hardest, determined to make a good show. At the end, I notice nobody is collecting race numbers and putting them into finishing times. What? Oh, it turns out they decided to cut out the timing to save money on the race, but didn't feel like it was important enough to tell anyone. The race organizers got a nice email from me later. They went back to timing it, but I'll never run it again. I'm sure I wasn't the only one who sent them a nice email. Frick them. Frick their race. I have a semi-relevant festival story. Free Press Summer Festival is usually held during the first weekend of June in Houston Hot. Typically it is at this huge park downtown with ample shade, grass, space, etc. Due to the flooding that hits us in May, it has been relocated for the past couple years to Reliant Park. Reliant Park is a bunch of pavement, hot, with no shade at all, death. They let you bring in empty water bottles camelbacks in 2015 and had these water stations set up throughout the park to fill them. But this water was hot, not easily accessible, and had huge lines. The only cold water was like $8 a bottle. It was ridiculous. I actually got pretty bad heat exhaustion, and I remember running from trash can to trash can across the park, throwing up at each one, trying to get to the medic tent. When I got there, they accused me of just using them to get free water and paid no attention, lol. People were dropping like flies that year, passing out from the heat. People were laying under food trucks for shade. It was brutal. Let's see if this one counts. My wife and I had 2 wedding receptions. See, our friends were mostly broke at the time, and all of our family lives in another city, so we got married there and had one reception with family. Then we came back to where we live now and had the real reception with friends a few weeks later. Since it was right around Halloween, we thought it would be a fun idea to get one of those murder mystery kits and do that as part of the dinner. Almost immediately after we invited everyone, a former friend reached out and asked if it would be cool if he proposed to his girlfriend at the event. We told him no. Fast forward to the day of the dinner. He approached me and my wife separately at least twice each to ask when would be a good time to propose to his girlfriend. Each time we told him that there wasn't really a good time, especially because we would be busy with the whole murder mystery thing. Fortunately, he finally stopped asking. Then it was time for the big reveal of who the murderer was. We gathered everyone up, and someone got up to make a toast to us. Dude gets up next, totally interrupting the whole thing, and says that he has an announcement. He takes a knee and proposes to his girlfriend right there. She bursts into tears and leaves the room. He follows. We don't see either of them for the rest of the night. To top it all off, her character was the murderer, so we never really got to finish the mystery thing. The next day, we find out from a mutual friend that the girlfriend had been thinking he might propose sometime soon, and had told him that if someone were to propose to her, she wouldn't want it to be a big public thing. She hated having all eyes on her, and would much rather just have a private thing. So not only did he trample all over our thing, he ignored her thing too. Not terribly planned, but still a horrible story. In my last year, a student from another high school was suddenly transferred into my class. Our high school was pretty prestigious, and there were rumors his parents had pulled strings to get him in at the last minute. So people weren't very receptive to him. That was until someone found the actual story. Apparently he had organized a rather large party for his 18th birthday, invited quite a few people from his class and hobby circles. Bid day rolls around. No one shows up. He calls who he thought were his friends, and turns out they all got together because a few of them didn't want to go to his party. Those few then convinced all the other friends not to go either. Then they laugh at him down the phone and call him lame for organizing a birthday party. People at my school were a lot more kind to that guy after we learned about that. That sounds like the setup for one of those horror movies where each and every teenager gets killed off in some gruesome way. It hasn't happened yet, but it's a guaranteed shitshow. 2 of my friends, who are allergic to planning, are getting married in July. They expect family and friends to fly in from across the country, but haven't bothered to send invitations or save the dates yet. But they assume that by posting their date on social media that everyone will know they can come. Oh, and they didn't want to spend money, so they're making their friends and family do all work involved at the wedding. From catering to cleanup to photography. No contracts signed, of course. Oh, and it's happening in a remote forest with no air conditioning or cell phone reception. So if anyone, like one of their guests doing a major job for the wedding, gets lost or has an emergency, it won't be possible for them to communicate. Oh, and where can guests stay in this remote location? There are maybe going to be cabins, but since there are no invitations yet, we aren't able to book these and they could be taken by the time we get this info. Apparently there are no other accommodations for 20-30 miles. The kicker is, these two expect their wedding to be super drunk and fun, which will be fine if guests don't have to drive. But it's only a couple months out now, so it's likely guests will have to drive over 20-30 miles, which means most won't be able to drink much. This is going to be real interesting. Please update after this happens. This sounds like a crap storm. I once went to a local metal detecting competition, where people in the metal detecting hobby go to compete. It was my first time. I wasn't impressed. The guy who put it on had his wife buy most of the raffle tickets for the metal detector raffle, and she won. The fields were not adequately mowed short enough and grass weeds preventing you from being able to use your metal detector well. The fields were seeded with coins, which may be normal, but I find it to basically be a canned hunt and pretty meaningless to me. I participated only in one hunt and it was one that had tokens and cash prizes instead of seeded coins. I won $2. There were too many competitors per hunt. Not a lot of area to move around because there were too many competitors on the field and too little finds to go around because of it. The guy who put it on bitched to the participants about leaving trash. I saw no trash left anywhere. The very few vendor sponsors offered absolute crap tools for sale and other low quality stuff. There were a lot of crotchety old guys, competitors, who gave me the stink eye because I brought a Bigfoot coil on my metal detector, which was within the rules. A Bigfoot coil is a long rectangular head that is at the end of the metal detector that is designed to detect shallow objects and cover a larger area. I guess they thought I was cheating or had an unfair advantage, but the fields were so badly mowed that it proved to be more of a hindrance since I couldn't get my coil low to the ground. As a result, I am never going to another one again. It was basically a giant waste of time and money. Till there are metal detector competitions. BMX event was planned in my city. Bring your kids, they said. There'll be pro BMs, airs and stalls. My kids were ecstatic. Showed up to an event that proved to be one guy doing tricks who wasn't a pro BMX person. He just was a local rider. Admittedly, he wasn't bad. The only other stall was a Hooters wing eating contest at an event aimed at kids. We left after 15 minutes and went to the mall instead. I posted this story in an AskReddit regarding the most cringeworthy thing that's happened to you. Here goes. Me and my best guy friend at the time were planning on going to the movies to see Deadpool last year. We lived on different sides of campus, so we planned on meeting at the theater. I thought this was going to be like a date, so we split a popcorn and grabbed seats. We chatted a bit, and once the previews started, he leaned in towards me and I definitely thought he was going in for a kiss. I went for it, only to be met by his hand on my mouth pushing me away and a weirded out look on his face. But turns out he was trying to ask me to move down a seat because he had decided to invite his new GF, who I had never met, knew about, and he wanted to sit by her. Not only was I mortified, but he kept the popcorn for himself and this chick. First and last time I initiate plans. Several years ago, a radio station ran a contest and me and my family won tickets to Halloween Horror Nights at Universal. We even had the express passes for the lines. Even with that, the line for the Saw experience was 4 freaking hours long for something that lasted less than 10 minutes and wasn't even remotely fun or scary. The actual horror was realizing 2 hours in that you needed to go to the restroom. I had a house party. I bought 1 bottle of orange soda and plain chips, both off-brand. A total of 3 people showed up. My brother, my mom, the neighbor kid, and it still wasn't enough. This might be my favorite. I was part of the committee for a university rock society, and we ran our own live music and club nights. As students, we wanted to keep it cheap as possible, so the easiest place to host it was in one of the Union Club rooms. We were there setting up from 4-5 p.m. Doors were at 7.30. When we got there, the main entrance to the room was still partially locked off, so we went through the back way to see if we could open the door from the other side. Turns out the corridor was blocked off because it hadn't been cleaned from the night before. There was mud all over the floor tracked in from smoker's section, broken glass bottles up and down the stairs, and dried up puddles of vomit. Bear in mind this is about 6:37 PM. Not only under an hour till our event starts, but at least 18 hours since Friday's club night ended. And not one person in the entire union thought maybe we should go clean up that broken glass and vomit. It finally did get sorted just before. We're talking like 5 minutes before doors. Then as people were arriving before band started, one of the committee goes to get a pint and the bar staff turn and say, oh, the taps haven't been working today. We've been in the room since 4 for 4 freaking hours, and they decide this is when they'll bring the problem up. We ask if we can buy drinks at one of the other union bars and bring them, because in every other bar the taps are working fine. But apparently that would confuse their sales. This is then the point they tell us that our event won't have any security until 9. Security are also the only people on campus with first aid training. One of the committee members, who TBF was a bit of a C, turns to the bar staff who told him this and says, can you not take the pee? So we then get berated by the on-duty manager for being abusive towards the staff. They then proceeded to shut us down an hour early because we weren't buying enough drinks. Freaking wonder why. They definitely just didn't want you guys there. I was asked to book a location for my organization's AGM, annual general meeting. The organization was an artist support network, so my boss wanted to book it in a local art gallery, somewhere where, if we gave them a few $100s to rent the space, we'd be giving back to the local arts community. I found a spot, emailed back and forth with them, and picked a date a few months away, sent them a deposit to secure the rental, talked a few more times over email, made sure we were all on the same page, and this is where I screwed up. I didn't continue to follow up with them, or check in closer to the date. I didn't think I had to. There was nothing more to discuss. Boy, did I learn my lesson. AGM day arrives. I get there early to set up, and there are dildos everywhere. Big ones, small ones, dancers jumping around wiggling dildos in the air. People are arriving for the AGM. Our membership was pretty big, so people had flown or driven into town from miles away, and we can't get into the space because this wacky dildo dance is happening. Turns out, the art gallery double booked us. They'd made a mistake and had lent the space to some kind of wacky, hypersexual performance art troupe. They'd allegedly emailed me to inform me of the double booking, but I never received that email, and they never bothered to call to make sure. Anyway, we ended up negotiating and taking up space in the back, in their dimly lit, cramped, cobweb-filled storage area. We tried to make the best of it, but it really sucked, and I've never been more mortified in my life. TLDR. Booked our very important AGM at an art gallery. They double booked us and we showed up to a dildo dance. All-day concert at the United Center in Chicago. Not as in it was all day on a parking lot of a venue. No shade, just 98-degree heat and the smell of melting asphalt. Water was expensive, beer even worse, and just enough of a breeze to push all the empty cups below the stage. Within hours anyone in front of a band was knee-deep of garbage, as it was on the direct landing path of O'Hare. Every 2 minutes a jet would land, and it was just like Wayne's World where all sound was blocked out. People were getting sick. They opened part of the United Center just to let people get shaved, and after that the audience completely abandoned the show. There were many people with that just stretched out on the floor to cool down. People took sink baths, and there was never a point where the audience outnumbered the band. We caught a few minutes of Andrew WK, as he sang mostly to himself. Has to be this metal festival in Upper Styria that took place only once. The place was commissioned for 10.000 people. Goal was 3.000. Break even was 1,800. Paying guests 300-400. Had been organized by a 18-year-old who, whilst already experiencing financial troubles, decided to make a festival to earn some. A week before the festival all other members of the Orga team left. For me it was a nice festival, beautiful nature, good bands, Lots of space, and I am always self-sufficient when I go to a festival. Enough to eat and drink for a week, even if it is only for 3 days. In retrospect, it is good that only so few people came, because I counted 6 toilets, 3 seats each for MF, no standing pissoirs, no fresh water access, 1 small food stand, 1 bar, 1 merch stand. The organization financial situation was so bad that around Saturday midday the owner of the stage showed up, told his technician to shut down the stage and threatened to not open it up unless he received several $1,000 on spot. The next band played with their studio small gig equipment they had in their tour bus. The headliners for the evening cancelled around 3 p.m. Yeah, fun times. That actually sounds like a lot of fun. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.